be two elements. We already have an I here, but that does not create a confusion. In the domain of G such that their G images are equal. Suppose I lies in this part of the domain and J is this extreme point, then Fi, by the definition of G, Fi is equal to Gi, which is equal to Gj because of our assumption, and then again because J is this is equal to X, which contradicts the hypothesis that X does not belong to X, because f of I belongs to X. Similarly, or a similar contradiction, or in fact the same contradiction, arises if J lies in this part and I is this. Hence, we have either I and J both satisfying these inequalities, or I and J both equal to this. I'm tempted to say integer again and again, but we don't know about integers yet. Natural number. Some more ink. So we will now have two cases. One of them is almost, we don't have to in fact do anything. Here we already have I equal to J, and that is our main aim. Here, however, we have to now conclude that I is equal to J. Assume these inequalities. Then, by the definition of G, G of I and G of J are respectively equal to f of I and f of j. Then now our original function f was a bijection, so it is a one-to-one function. Since f is injective, we have I equal to j. On the other hand, if we have both I and j equal to this natural number, then of course I is equal to j. So in any case, this assumption leads us to the conclusion that I and j are equal. That's why g is a one-to-one function or injective function. Hence, g is injective. Now next we show that g is surjective. So we take any element in the range of g. Next, let z be any element here. Okay. If z is equal to x, then z appears as the g image of this natural number by the definition of g. So that means if z is here, then we have a pre-image of z under g. This is the pre-image. So now next thing is we assume z is in x. So assume z is in x. Now original f was a function with range x and f is bijective, so f is surjective. So that means z will have a pre-image under f in x. Since f is surjective, we have z is equal to x we cannot use because x is a special element here. Z is equal to f of y for some y belonging to x, but on the set x, f is nothing but g. But then we could have written a y belonging to x also, but here we are just showing the fact that z appears as the g image of some element in the domain of g. So that's why we are writing the full domain. Thus g is surjective. So we have shown that g is a bijection between this set and this union. So by definition, this union is finite because this is a natural number, and the cardinality of this union is this natural number. Hence, x union singleton set x is finite. and we also have that formula for its cardinality. So this completes part A. Okay, then in part B we are given two finite sets and we have to prove that their union is finite. Okay, in the first part, did I have to consider the case x equal to empty sets separately? The way we have defined the function g, can it be defined when x is empty set? Let me just see, okay, otherwise we will have to write that one also. If f is this function, which is the empty set, then can we define g like that, like the way we have defined it? This is the cardinality of x, so in place of cardinality of x we have 0, so 0 plus 1 is 1, and we have this. Now what will be g? According to our definition, on this set g is f. That means if I specifically write the definition itself, then it is f of I if I lies between 1 and 0, and it is equal to x if I is equal to cardinality of x plus 1, that is 1. Does it make sense? If this happens, then g of I is f of I, and this is an implication which is vacuously true. If however I is 1, then g of I is x. In fact, looking at this set, you can see that this is also a singleton set which has only one natural number, that is 1. This is also a singleton set which has only one element, that is x, and basically this function is just nothing but this. So yes, whatever we have written in that solution, that also applies in this case. However, to get rid of these trivial nuisances, we may say, we handle them in the remaining parts in the beginning itself. If x is empty set or y is the empty set, then the assertion is trivially true. Here the assertion has some things. The first thing is that the union of x and y should be shown to be finite, and we have to show that its cardinality is less than or equal to the sum of the cardinalities of x and y. Additionally, if x and y turn out to be disjoint, then in place of that inequality we have equality. So we have those things here in this case. If x is empty, say x is empty, then x union y is nothing but y. Since y is finite, so this is finite, okay. And what is its cardinality? Its cardinality is actually equal to the cardinality of y, because these are the same sets, which you can also write as cardinality of x plus cardinality of y. X is empty, so this is 0, and in this case you can see that we are having equality, which is also an inequality like this. Why do we have equality here? Because x is empty, and that's why this intersection is empty, that is x and y are disjoint. So all the things are true in this case, although trivially true. So that's what we have written, and we are right. Now assume both x and y are non-empty. Okay, and they are given to be finite. So we will find appropriate bijections since x and y are finite. There exist bijections let's write here f from this set, just like the previous part. And okay, so we are now going to first handle the case where x and y are disjoint. Although it comes after the general case, but we are going to handle it first because it's easier to handle. Okay, now with the help of these two functions, in this special case, we are going to define a new function. Define h from the set of all natural numbers lying between 1 and cardinality of x plus cardinality of y into x union y by this formula. H of say z is defined to be equal to f of z, or not z but I. Okay, I am always making this mistake. The domain is a part of the system of natural numbers, so that's why we are taking I. Okay, so this is equal to f of I if I lies between 1 and cardinality of x. It makes sense, this we can do, and this is equal to, okay, in this case I think it's better to have the things in the other order. for some reason. That is, we write x as the domain and this as the range. Let's just do that, because that's how I envision the solution. So if I now change it, I may not be able to grasp what is going on instantly. So this is a function from this and so define h from x union y into this. Then here also there will be changes. If you want, you can write I here as well. Nothing will be logically wrong, but we have associated some meaning to these symbols in the way they are being used. I, j, these things in this context generally mean natural numbers. However, the letters that come towards the end of the alphabet, they usually mean arbitrary elements in a set, x, y, u, v, z, those things. F of z, if z belongs to x, okay, and this is equal to cardinality of x plus g of z if z belongs to y. Okay, now look at this function h. The first thing we have to see is, of course, if h is well defined or not. So we see one by one all the things. We take an element in the domain of h. This element will either lie in x or in y, but not in both at the same time, because x and y are disjoint. So say z lies in x, then the image is f of z, which is lying between 1 and cardinality of x. Fine. If, however, z lies in y, then this is the output. Now note that g of z by definition lies between 1 and cardinality of y. So that means from the properties of inequalities that we have already proved when we developed the system of natural numbers, we can add cardinality of x throughout to have this. So this output is after all between 1 and this upper bound. So it is in the range, and in every case we are getting a single output, a unique output for a given input, because f and g are well defined functions. So that's why h is well defined, and we can just write that just like that. Clearly h is well defined. Usually we do not write anything more than this in showing or in mentioning that H is well defined if the representation of an element in the domain of H is unique. You see, you write Z. Z is just Z. Z is nothing else. It's not like having a congruence class. Say, if you recall those things from algebra, say modulo 3 we consider this congruence class, which is the set of all integers that leave remainder 1 when divided by 3. The same set can also be written like this. You see that if we just look at these congruence classes, they seem different although they are the same thing. Now, if you define a function whose input is this congruence class or congruence classes like this, however, in the definition of the function you use this value, the representative of the congruence class, then you have a problem in the definition unless you show that whatever representative you choose, you either choose 1 or 4 or something else, that does not affect the output, it does not change the output, then only that function will be well defined. So there we have some work to do in showing that the function is well defined. Here, however, such problems are not there, so that's why we write like this. We just quickly see whether things are alright or not. So H is well defined. So now next, naturally we have to show first of all H is 1 to 1 and then H is onto. So let's just go for those things. Next, let Z1 and Z2 belong to the domain of H such that their H values are equal. Okay, so here also, just like the previous part, we have to prove that we get something wrong if we assume Z1 belongs to X, for example, and Z2 belongs to Y, or the other way around. Suppose Z1 belongs to X and Z2 belongs to Y. Then by the definition of H of Z1 will be what? F of Z1 okay, this is nothing, some pops are going. Okay, so F of Z1 is equal to H of Z1 by definition. However, since Z2 belongs to Y, so H of Z2 will be equal to cardinality of X plus G of Z2. This, however, is not possible because F of Z1 will lie in here in this set, so it is by definition less than or equal to cardinality of X. However, G of Z2 lies here, so its value is greater than or equal to 1. So G of Z2 plus cardinality of X is greater than or equal to 1 plus cardinality of X. So how can these two be equal? So our supposition is wrong. Similarly, we can't have x in y and this is not x, what am I, z1 and z2, z1 in y and z2 in x, then also a similar problem will appear. Hence, either both z1 and z2 belong to x or they both belong to y. So we assume this one first. Assume z1 and z2 both belong to x. Then what do we get from this one? Then this will be equal to f of z1, this is f of z2. And then again, you can see a sameness in the way we are going on solving these things. Then we will apply the fact that f is injective and draw the conclusion that z1 is equal to z2. Since f is injective, we have z1 equal to z2. Next, assume that z1 and z2 both belong to y. Then g of z1 plus cardinality of x is h of z1, which is equal to h of z2, and this is equal to g of z2 plus cardinality of x. So we can cancel this from both sides and have gz1 equal to gz2. Now, just like f, g is also a bijection, so it is injective. So in any case, this equality hz1 equal to hz2 has led us to this conclusion. So that means h is injective. So h is injective. Next, we prove that h is surjective. Now let us take k, say k be a natural number such that it lies between 1 and this natural number. In other words, k is an element in the range of h, range of the function. So here two cases will occur. assume first that K lies between these two bounds. Now K is a natural number lying in not only the range of H but actually the range of F, because we have these bounds. Since F is surjective, K is equal to F of I for some natural number I lying between, oh no, wait, I think I have made a mistake. It is not F of I because it lies in the range of F. F is a function from X into this set. Okay, sorry about this. This is equal to F of X for some X in X.